The feast of the presentation of Christ at the temple, or Candlemas, is known as the Bittersweet Festival. It looks back both backwards and forwards. It looks backwards to Christmas, as the infant child, 40 days old, is brought to the temple to do what the law requires. It also looks forward to Lent, which is only a few weeks away, and to its ending in Passiontide, as Jesus is betrayed, arrested, tried, beaten, and eventually killed upon the cross. So it brings the joy of Christmas and the bitterness of Passiontide together into one feast. We look back to Christmas with all the joy of the newborn baby, of the romance of that story of the shepherds and the wise men. And we remember the joy that it is that Jesus is with us. God has come to be one of us. No more is that seen in last week's reading, which John starts Jesus' ministry with the wedding feast at Cana, where Jesus is there enjoying the wonder and happiness of a wedding ceremony and a wedding party. He's fully entered into the joy of being human. But yet a week forward, and we see the end of that ministry, where he is betrayed, where he is beaten, where he dies a horrible death, because people are cruel. For the early church, these two events, God with us and God dying upon the cross, made them have to rethink seriously who this God they worshipped was. They had to rethink all their conceptions of God and come to understand who this God was who was being revealed in the life and death and resurrection of Jesus. And in many ways, we're still doing the same. We're trying to make sense of who this God is as he's revealed in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. Too often we fall, when we think about God or we think about life, we fall on one extreme or the other. We fall into a Christmas extreme where we think of the joy and the happiness and the hope and all the good things that are in life and in God. Or sometimes we get ourselves into a place where we can only see darkness. We can only see the black. We can only see the negative. We have no hope. We despair. We live at the foot of the cross. When people are bereaved, quite often that's what happens. They can only see the immediate moment. They can see the death of their loved one. They can see perhaps the last illness and the difficulty. They can feel the sense of loss and hopelessness and wondering what the future will hold. But if all goes well, and most times it does, over time that feeling will dissipate. The loss will still be felt, but it will be put in perspective, and the other parts of life will be remembered. The joyous times, the loving times, the major events in life, and maybe some of the minor ones. And that life of the lost born person will be put in perspective into a fullness of a full picture. And that's, I think, what this festival calls us to do, to look at God in the fullness, to remember that we have a God who does come to join us and be with us, who shares our lives and who understands what it means to be human, understands our possibilities, our failures, our hopes, and our disappointments, because he's been one of us. And this is the God we can share a relationship with. And he came to us for a reason, because he loved us and loved all his creation. We must always remember in the Genesis story, when God's finished making the world, he steps back and says, "It is very good." And God always thinks it's very good. And that's why he is so angered and disappointed by sin, because it mars his creation. Most importantly, it mars his beloved human beings who by their sin destroy and damage what he has made. But that love is not just about being with us and sharing in our joys and sharing in the beauty of this earth. It's also a love that's willing to sacrifice itself to bring us right, And that's what the cross says. So here is a God of love, a God of joy, but also a God of sorrow and pain when he sees what's happened to his beautiful creation and his beautiful human beings. So he needs to come and fix it. And he does by offering himself on the cross. So in a sense, this festival points to God's great love for us. His love and desire to be with us, and his love willing to sacrifice for us. Simeon saw this. Simeon understood the situation it is, and he points to Jesus' mother and says, this is a joyful time. We are joyful we have this boy, but he will be a sword that pierces your heart as you stand at the bottom of the foot of the cross and see him suffering. So the God we worship is a God of not just one part of our life, or one part of the world, or one part of creation, but a God of it all. The God of our joys and our sorrows, the God of our successes and our failures, the God of our hopes and our despairs. He is a God of when we get things right and when we get things wrong. He is the God of all the universe. He is the God of all creation, and he is the God of all our lives.